Hi, I'm Mike Gonzalez, the U.S. Ambassador to Zambia. Last month, in January of 2023, the United States celebrated 20 years of the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR as it's become known. That's 20 years of partnership with the people and government of Zambia, 20 years of momentum in working to fight and end this disease as a public health threat. So now, as we celebrate 20 years, we're kicking off a Facebook campaign called #PEPFAR20, where we're going to highlight people who are living positively with HIV. We're going to talk about awareness raising and how to link people with testing and services so that the people of Zambia can continue to live healthy, prosperous lives and contribute fully to their society. So to kick off our campaign, I have the unique honor and frankly the delight to introduce you to a woman who probably needs no introduction, the Honorable Princess Kasune Zulu, MP, representing Kiembe from the Central Province, is internationally known as an activist, as a mother, a grandmother. I met her at World AIDS Day last year, where I can honestly say she struck me at my core and has inspired me ever since in her activism and living positively. So Honorable Kasune Zulu, it's really a pleasure to welcome you here.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador, for having me. And indeed, it's worth celebrating 20 years of the presidential initiative, which have come to be known as PEPFAR Fund. And PEPFAR, and having been there, in that Oval Office, seated right the way you and I are seated, from then President George W. Bush. Next to him was Senator Colin Powell, Tammy Thompson, and really just the like minds of the people who wanted to make a difference for people living with HIV, but also those who were affected with HIV and AIDS. And I happen to be one of those people. Actually, I was the only one from Africa invited to that delegation because of my story. I had lost both of my parents to HIV and AIDS in the early 90s. And then I lost a baby sister. I had lost a brother. And I came to learn that I was also living with HIV in 1997. But I think what attracted even my coming to the US to meet with President George W. Bush and indeed to speak on the mics after the meeting at the Oval Office was the fact I told myself, though I may have been affected with HIV, though I was infected with HIV, I knew that the answer lied in breaking the silence, the stigma, and the discrimination that was attached to HIV and AIDS. And that's how my story began.
That's fantastic. And frankly, you were there before PEPFAR. You were there helping to inform the President of the United States in his deliberations as he was designing what has become the largest contribution in the world's history to fight any disease. But HIV 20 years ago, in 2003, was a very different disease. Can you talk about what did an HIV diagnosis back in that time mean?
Well, it was a death sentence because I remember I used to live in a town called Wanshire on the Copperbelt, and the doctor really was even hesitant to have me test because he said, you look healthy, you look beautiful, this is a disease far away for the gay community, for promiscuous women, women in the sexual trade industry. And the little I had learned was that actually it wasn't about that. It was about somebody having contracted HIV, whether it's at birth for the children, whether it could have been from a partner who had it without knowing or knowing. And for me, I was driven to really break the silence because I think diseases, especially HIV, was covering itself in shame, in stigma, and also in attributing it to behaviors and forgetting the human first. So when I tested positive, I really had a very unique experience. I've told it in my book, Warrior Princess. It's my autobiography that came out in 2010, actually published in the US. I really felt this unspeakable joy And not that I was happy about the diagnosis, but I saw an opportunity. I clearly felt like this was my destiny. This is what I was called to do. And remember, at that time, I was only given 6 months to live.
Is that right?
Yes. But I told myself something. I cannot change my own situation. I cannot change my parents leaving us, and I became the head of the house at the age of 17. Both my parents and father died, like I said earlier. But I knew that I could change someone else's life.
Yeah.
I could speak to that issue. Truck drivers, I would hitchhike with the truck drivers just so that they know there's this disease. What about the mothers who are being abandoned in hospitals during those times? So we have come a long way, Ambassador, and it gives me goosebumps even as an individual to realize that there I was not too far from here when I received a call from White House contacts, of course, through World Vision then, and said, because of her leadership in her country, we want her to come and speak in front of the President of the United States. And of course, I was so ignorant at the time. I was like, sure. And so there I was, and here we are today. PEPFAR has touched so many lives, and so many children are being born HIV negative because of that one act of the American people.
Yeah. Well, and you've played a massive role in that, not only in informing my government, the United States government, with both the President and the Congress who appropriates the funds, but as a role model of people living positively with HIV, people being candid and open about your experiences. Can you talk a little bit about the stigma? You touched on it, but it seems that in these past 20 years of PEPFAR, the notion of stigma has shifted dramatically.
Well, Ambassador, I think what you see when there is hope, people begin to normalize a condition. And I think that is one of the biggest roles that PEPFAR has played, because at a time when you had HIV, they knew that sooner or later you're going to progress to AIDS. And at that time, there were all kind of local names, go and say bye to your parents, Kalaye Noko, things like that. You look like an eagle. You know, there were all these Zambian names which were very derogatory. Yeah. But I think the more people like me and others started going out there and say, hey, I am HIV positive. I used to have a saying, the virus lives in me, I don't live in the virus. Yeah. And people began to look at people living with HIV differently. I make an effort and through other organizations to speak to churches, because in a country like Zambia, where is it 90-80% people profess to be Christians, it was so critical that the message went to the Christian community. And I was even privileged in the White House to have come and spoken at the day of prayer on Capitol Hill with then Senator Hillary Clinton, with what's his name? I've forgotten the name. He wrote a book about the prayer of Jabez, Bruce Wilkinson, and the president of World Vision, because even then they saw the need for the church, even in America, to really personalize the issue of HIV and to run away from stigmatizing people without knowing. Now, coming to Zambia, so much has changed, Ambassador. When I stood for the first time and won as a member of parliament in 2016, my mentor then, Dr. Manasseh Piri, great advocate on HIV, may he so rest in peace, he told me, make sure you talk about your HIV status in that maiden speech. Yeah. It was the first time that a lawmaker, a member of parliament, and I was the first member of parliament, female member of parliament, since independence 1964. And I told my story that I am HIV positive, and yet I'm a lawmaker. Yeah. And it sent a signal. Even in Africa, I think it was sending a signal. I heard that another lawmaker in the UK ended up becoming public about it. But the more people can see people in high places, in higher positions, to say, not only am I affected because of my family, because of my friends, I am HIV positive as well. The more people begin to realize this is just any other condition, and there are things we can do to minimize and to reduce the stigma, but also to stop the mother-to-child transmission and to ensure that children born with HIV, they don't have to die young, and those who are negative, to make sure that they remain HIV negative, because it is possible.
Absolutely. And each time I've seen you speak, it seems that the badge of honor that you hold most dear is your role as a mother and now as a grandmother. What message do you have to women, whether they're women living with HIV or are women living with HIV who are planning to have children?
Well, again, to the mothers out there, I just want to tell you that the world has changed so much thanks to PEPFAR and thanks to the people of the United States. They have made it possible for people like you and I in Zambia to have access to treatment, and that has also prevented mother-to-child transmission. I don't know what the percentage is, but if the therapy is administered well, you can reduce mother-to-child transmission to 2%. So that is tremendous difference. I'm just coming from the African Union, where the First Ladies, and in particular the First Lady of Namibia, First Lady Monica Gengors, has come up with an initiative called Africa Reach, where she's talking about pediatric HIV and AIDS adolescents and the youths. And in there is this idea that mothers out there, if you want to have a child, you can have a child and not have the guilt of passing on the virus to your children. But I also want to speak to those who, without knowing, passed on the virus to their children. I know that you must live with that guilt, but I want to encourage you that I do know of stories of people like Oswald, who today in Zambia is being funded by USAID, and they have gone on to live HIV positive, got married, and have their own children who are HIV negative. So there is hope. One word for this interview, if nothing else people remember, it is there is hope.
Absolutely. And I think the key to that is making sure that if people may be concerned about their status, to get tested early, and if they are positive, to get access to treatment. We know that adolescents, and particularly young women and girls, are particularly susceptible or have experienced much higher rates of infection. Any particular messages from your side to young women in Zambia?
Absolutely. Again, it is the face of HIV continue to be women. Is it that out of 5 girls, 3 are likely to be infected compared to 1 boy out of 5? Those are the statistics that stand to be corrected. So because of our biological makeup, we are forever much vulnerable than the boys. But again, you have heard that undetected and transmittable. Now, it's a message that I'm always careful with. I don't want young people out there, because how will you know that the other partner is undetectable?
That's right.
Especially with lack of viral load testings and things like that. So all I'll say is take care of yourself. Yeah, and education is the biggest key.
Absolutely. You've been very generous in attributing...
Excuse me.
No worries. You've been very generous in attributing so much of these successes to the United States. I would argue that the U.S. has played an important role, but we would not have been able to achieve most of these accomplishments without the very deep partnership of the Zambian government. Those are the ones providing so much of the services day in, day out across this country, but also Zambian people, such as yourself. It's 20 years later, and you are still as active and vivacious and the activist on a global stage. And I thought you say
as beautiful as well?
Well, I was going to say those very same things your doctor said in the early 2000s, as healthy and as beautiful as ever. How do you stay motivated, though?
Well, Your Excellency, back to the very words that I use, that the virus lives in me. I do not live in the virus. And being a person of faith, I've also grabbed to the Holy Book, which is the Bible. And I think a lot of scriptures do point us to hope in the midst of a hopeless situation. And also, I think being open about it, being able to laugh, you realize that not only for people living with HIV, but any incurable circumstance, if it leads you to have more faith in the Creator, however you want to call the Creator, if it leads you to realize that actually every day that I wake up, it tells me that I'll do the best with that day, because tomorrow is not guaranteed, it makes you look at life very differently. So I've told people that in a way, being HIV positive has become a blessing in disguise. It has made me realize that life should never be taken for granted. And I'm always asking myself, what can I do to make someone else's life a better day or a better life? And so I've gone on to adopt as many children. I've always done that. I've supported as many children in university, in college, and now with the free education, the government of Zambia, it is a plus. But remember, we are coming from being in opposition for so many years, and I really wanted to come back from Chicago, actually, to Zambia to give back to my country. So it is this idea that every life should matter, because we are only stewards in this world. And there are only two important days in everyone's else life: the day you're born and the day you die. The question is, what did you do in between?
Well, I can tell what you've done in between, and while certainly people find hope in many different places, I can see very clearly why so many people are inspired for hope from you and your activism. So, Honorable Kasune Zulu, it's really an honor to sit down with you and to hear directly from you your experience. Thank you for your activism. And thank you for your partnership with the people of the United States as we continue to fight HIV/AIDS as a global health threat.
Thank you so very much to the American government, but indeed to the American people. Thank you.
Really a pleasure.